Chris, thank you so much for coming on the Easy Prey podcast today.
Thanks for inviting me. It's great to be with a fellow Chris.
Yes, it is, and the transcriptionist will have a horrible time with this.
Yes,
Chris said this, and Chris said
Chris said
this.
that.
So, can you give myself and the audience a little background about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I'm in a field security consultant. And way back in the day, I worked doing exploit writing and training in network pen testing. And I realized that that was not a skill that I was going to excel at. So I started to focus on human vulnerability and ended up writing a framework for something called social engineering. And that led to my first book in 2010, which led to my company that I now run. And my whole focus since then has been in understanding human decision making, why we're vulnerable because of decisions we make, and how we can help people be more secure.
Awesome. And one question I've started to ask at the beginning of my episodes, and feel free to work it in later if it's appropriate later, um, really trying to destigmatize people who have fallen victim to cybersecurity incidents, phishing, hacking, social engineering, because it's easy to say, hey, they blew it, they're a bad
Mm-hmm.
person. When most cybersecurity experts have, fallen for something, been tricked to do something, because it's like I think we're going to talk. It's human nature. So, have you ever fallen victim to a cybersecurity incident, or probably more importantly in your field, social engineering?
100%. So I tell people this all the time because I hate that phrase, like there's no patch for human stupidity, because it makes it sound like only stupid people fall for these things. And that is not the case. I don't
Hmm.
think I'm the smartest person in the room, but I also know I'm not the dumbest. And I've sent 19 million phishing email in my career. And my third book was all about the psychology of phishing. And I fell hook, line, and sinker for a phishing email. I got phished with an Amazon email. I was rushed trying to get to an airport. I fully clicked on that link and almost I got saved last second, but almost gave all of my credentials over. And I believed it 100%. So yes, and I'm the guy who sends fish, and that was a real incident.
I appreciate you sharing that, because I think it really helps people to realize, like, we're all in this together,
Yeah.
and we need to get it right most of the time, but we're all human, and we're going to make mistakes here and there. So let's talk about social engineering. How would you define that?
I love that question, by the way, because I know when people search for it, you get the definition online is like the malicious use of this, this, or this. And when I started doing this, that framework I told you about, I realized that there was good and bad, that there was good and bad to social engineering. So my definition is any act that influences a person to take an action that may or may not be in their best interest. And that broad definition helps us to encapsulate both the good and the bad side of what social engineering is.
So let's kind of talk about it, working from good social engineering to bad social engineering. We'll just kind of work our way down
Mm-hmm.
through it, and ask questions along the way. How would you define good social engineering? I think I can, hopefully parenting is good social engineering, but how
Right.
would you define?
I love that parenting. I also think of imagine if you had a really good friend that was doing something really bad for their health. Maybe they were smoking too much or drinking too much, or they were um, overweight and not wanting to exercise, and you were really concerned about their health. You can walk in and go, "Hey, fatso, come on, you got to go to the gym." That's not really social engineering. That's insulting.
Yeah.
Or you can think of what can I do to motivate my friend to want to come work out with me? Or what tools can I use? Maybe I ask him for help. Like, man, I'm losing motivation lately. I can really use like a workout buddy. Would you want to do that? Now you're influencing him to do something good for his health without walking up to him and saying, "Hey, you're really disgusting. Why don't you go to the gym with me?"
Yeah.
I think of times where my daughter has got me to do things that are crazy, right? Like getting my nails painted and having makeup on my face. Like what? Like, and now that she's 18, 19 years old, she gets me to ride these roller coasters that I'm deathly afraid to ride. And people go, "That's because you love her." I'm like, "Yeah, but there's something more about it." Like when my daughter makes a request, my brain goes through the same process that would happen if you make that request.
Yeah.
If you said, "Hey, can we have a princess tea party on the podcast here?" My brain would go, "Well, that's a request." And I go, "No, thank you." But if my daughter asks me, I get oxytocin released in my brain because I love her and trust her. And then I want to make her happy because I need that dopamine. So by saying yes to her, I know I'm making her happy. And that chemical process allows me to say yes to things that I would normally say no to. And that's positive social engineering.
So, what are the mechanisms of oxytocin and dopamine?
So oxytocin, a wonderful researcher, a guy named Dr. Paul Zak, he wrote a book called The Moral Molecule. I had a chance to actually chat with him on my podcast, and he did this research into this molecule called oxytocin, and it's the molecule that's linked that's released in our bloodstream that creates the feelings of trust and rapport.
Hmm.
Now, it's very heavily seen during moments of intimacy, a mom breastfeeding her baby. But he also found that, like, if you and I have a great conversation like we are, and
Hmm.
now let's say an hour from now, like I trust you, you trust me, we're having a great convo. An hour from now, I'm on LinkedIn and I connect with you. My brain will release oxytocin again because it says, "Hey, that guy, you liked him. You had a good conversation with him. You want to be happy when you think about Chris." So my brain releases oxytocin
Hmm.
because we have that rapport and trust relationship.
And then dopamine?
So dopamine is the happy drug, right? It rewards us, and dopamine has been studied heavily by so many different outfits because dopamine, they use it in video games to reward for a certain action. But dopamine in nature, you get hit a dopamine when you do something good, when your
Hmm.
brain says, "Ooh, that was good for you," or "You enjoyed that." That makes you happy, and we feel excited. And uh, so those two things together, when I trust someone and then I want to make them happy, that's like a chemical soup of goodness inside your head.
Is there a This is from the non-scientific background, the guy who didn't do well in biology and chemistry. Do these two compounds kind of, for lack of a term, if they mix together in your brain, is there more than just a combination of the two? Is there a,
Hmm.
not necessarily a third chemical, but is the effect magnified when they're both present at the same time or
That's actually a
in
great
similar
question.
time?
I don't actually know the answer to that, so I'm going to say I don't know because I would hate to say an answer and then someone from the science community listening to this goes, "No, that's not right." Here, I'll tell you my guess though. I'll tell you the honest answer is I don't know, but I'm going to tell you the guess is that you can have them separate. You
Hmm.
can have oxytocin, and that can be studied in the bloodstream alone, and you can have dopamine without oxytocin. You can ride a roller coaster and get dopamine, and there may be no oxytocin involved in that because there's nothing about trust and rapport with that roller coaster. You just
Hmm.
got hit with a good drug because you're all happy because you did a thing that made you happy, right? But those two together, according to Dr. Zak's research, builds a bond,
Hmm.
right? And what he found was that oxytocin is stronger not if you trust me. So if you trust me, that's great. But if I say, "Hey, you know what, Chris, I'm going to tell you something I haven't done in any podcast before, and I'm going to tell you, you're the first to know." And then let's say I do it, I tell you something, and later on you find out, "Wow, that was the first. He wasn't lying to me." Your brain goes, "Whoa, he trusted me." And your brain releases oxytocin about me because you
Hmm.
felt very special to have that trusting relationship. So I got to imagine those two things together are probably more powerful than separate.
Gotcha. So we've talked a little bit about the good in social engineering, family building, relationships. Is there? We talked a little bit about this in the quote unquote green room. Is there a middle ground before you start getting to malicious?
I think there is, and that can be the same story, the same accounts we just gave, friends, family, all of that. And I think of marketing because marketing, like, think about it. We all right away, you probably will know this commercial, right? A famous singer comes on, her sad song is playing in the background. There's pictures of malnourished dogs,
Yeah.
living in squalid, terrible conditions. And then for $1 a day, and the music lifts, and then you see healthy dogs running onto the screen and they're licking people and kids are happy. And that dollar a day is now being linked in your brain with happy dogs,
Hmm.
but you not paying is linked with these squalid, terrible conditions and starving dogs. That's that is influence. That is influence principles. That's what social engineering is basically being used to help try to motivate you to donate to this charity. Um, there's a fine line because marketing can also be very manipulative in the sense that there's been a ton of studies like in shopping malls where they'll pump certain smells through air vents because those smells will make you either shop longer or take slower time or want to buy something. Like, can you walk past an and Aunt Annie's right, without wanting a pretzel? I mean, that smell is like crack, right? I mean, it's just like you smell it from them, you're like you're drawn towards it, and we know the smell now. Like I say it, you start laughing. Why?
Yeah.
Because we've all had that experience, right? So I think that would be like the middle ground to me because it's influential, but it can also be manipulative.
Hmm. I guess it's a question of once interests are no longer aligned, it crosses over to manipulation when it's not in your interest anymore.
I think intent, right? So yeah, what is the intent, right? If my intent is I want to help you and I use positive forms of influence, then I look at that as the positive side of social engineering. Marketing has intent, but if their intent is I don't really care if you need it, if you want it, or if it hurts you, I'm just going to sell it to you. I think of fast food companies that like all of a sudden you can't get a small.
Yeah.
There is no such thing as a small drink anymore. And they have them, but it's the same exact price as the one that's like 44 ounces of liquid sugar, right? Now, why? Is there a benefit for them? I don't know because they're selling the small for 99 cents and this giant tub of it for 99 cents. They're getting rid of more product, but why would they push it this way? So I look at that and go, that kind of marketing borders on the line because they're not really caring about if it's good for you, if it's going
Yeah.
to hurt you, if it's going to hurt your health or finances. They just care about their end goal, which is moving product.
Yeah. And it helps move other product. Well, if you got the sweet,
Yes,
then you have to have more fries with
you
the
have
salty
to.
fries to go with it.
You have to.
And probably the bulk of our conversation here is going to be the bad forms of social engineering because that's what the podcast is about.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how people are being social engineered in a bad way.
So again, it's the same principles, right? I mean, we see malicious social engineering using things like trust and rapport building, but malicious social engineering also seems to focus a lot on other emotions like fear and anger, lust, things like that, right? Where if I can get you afraid, then you're more likely to take an action that you shouldn't take because fear makes the amygdala take over our processing, right? Critical thought, frontal lobe shuts down. The limbic system kicks into gear. Amygdala, which is triggered by fear, creates an environment where we start to react based on our experiences and feelings, not on thought. So if you really think your credit card got hacked or your account's been, you have to click here right now, you have to do it, or the IRS is really on the phone about to come arrest you, you may take an action, right? There's a terrible story I just read about this woman who was called and the voice on the phone sounded like her daughter.
I remember hearing this
Right.
news
And
story.
she said that, Mommy, I made a mistake. They have me and they're going to hurt me. Please save me. And then it sounded like her. It was coming from her number. The guy comes on the phone in a mass voice and demands money. Now, I don't know about you. I do this for a living, but if that happened to me and I didn't know if my daughter was safe and they were asking for something like $5,000, $10,000, I may just do it just to make sure she's not going to get hurt.
Yeah.
Right. And so that fear took over for that mother. And there was no rational thought ability at that point. It's now, you're talking about a mother saving her child. That all the way is 100% malicious social engineering because
Yeah.
it focuses on creating an environment where your critical thought is not even possible.
Gotcha. So is it really about change, subverting the choice, the decision making control of our brain?
It is because when you think about like, let's use one that's maybe not so personal and scary. Let's look at one of the other biggest scams going on, BEC scams, right? Where people are at companies are being told they need to do a wire transfer. Look, Chris, I'm your vendor and you haven't paid me. I'm going to stop shipment on the next supply. I need to get paid today or I can't do it. And plus you're 30 days. Look, I'll waive the late fees if you could do it right now. Right. And now you're talking a company like Toyota fell for this to the tune of $34 million.
Wow. A single incident or multiple incidents?
Three transfers over 3 days that equaled
Wow.
$34.2 million. So you look at that and you're like, well, was it fear? No, it probably was some AR person, some accounting person sitting there who got the email and the phone call at the same time thinking, oh my gosh, like if the plant shuts down because we didn't pay this bill, like my head's gonna roll.
Yeah.
So now they're just like, I gotta take care of this. Transfer's done. Then the next day they're like, okay, well, it didn't get stopped and nobody's calling the cops. So the guy calls back and he's like, and listen, we got this other invoice that is just about to be due. Third day, same. And then finally someone upstairs comes down and goes, where's this $34 million going? And the guy's like, to our vendor. I'm like, that's not our vendor.
Oh,
And there's the money's gone, no way to get it back, right? So same emotional state, but now instead of like fear for your child's life, it's, oh my, I don't want to get fired because I didn't do my job. And that environment creates a situation where the person's not thinking, and also giving them enough believable facts that it could make sense, that it could be true.
yeah. I remember a news story of a gentleman that would do landscaping for fast food restaurants. So just the regular landscape maintenance, and got a bunch of clients, and one of the clients stopped paying him or was late, and that happens from time to time. So he's like, hey, whatever. And then they're like 60 days late, 90 days late, and he goes, but the client says, hey, you haven't paid me. And they say, oh well, you called us and we paid you. Here's our here's our
Ooh.
copy of our invoices, copy of our payments. And he's like, well, that's not my bank account. He goes, well, but you
Oh,
called us and changed the bank account. And he goes, well,
wow.
that's not my
I haven't
bank
heard
account.
this one.
And the rub is that he's like, okay, well, you still need to pay your bill. And they're like, well, it's not our fault. We're not going to,
Yeah.
it's not our fault. We have a paid invoice. He's like, but you gave it to the wrong, you sent the money to the wrong
Yeah.
person.
I
And,
don't
and like,
know.
there's this
I don't know how I
dispute of
feel
the,
about that, right? I don't know how I feel about that. That's terrible.
again, it was just, a fairly
Yeah.
simple social engineering, but this poor
Yeah.
guy is like, the company was like, well, but we've paid the bill.
Right.
He's like, no, but you didn't pay
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And of course, it turns into a big legal mess of, well, whose fault is it? Of course, the
I mean,
landscaper's going, how could any of this be
yeah.
my fault?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I
so it
mean,
was
and
this,
honestly, the landscaper should be paid, right? I mean, he's owed the service, so he
yes,
should be paid. But wow, I feel bad for those companies because they got social engineered and now they're going to double pay.
yeah.
Oh,
So it wasn't like we're giving you a fictitious bill.
right.
It was, hey, we're just going to pay it. So just send it to a
Yeah.
different account, mail the check to a different address.
Oh man.
Ah. And to me, it's like some scammer thought a little bit about like, let's figure out how to be less dramatic. How do we
Yeah.
make this more plausible?
It's actually I hate to give them any kind of
Yeah.
respect, but it's the thing that constantly fascinates me about the bad guys is they are so ingenious at coming up with ways to do this, right? Like so, like let's dissect that particular attack. Most likely, there was some landscaping company that was very proud to have all of these companies,
Yep.
so they put it on their website. We are the spot. We are the vendor for Taco Bell, KFC, McDonald's, right? Bam. Now some attackers out there and says, "Oh, look at they're that we can use that," and they come up with this ruse to call these fast food joints and say, "Okay, we're just changing our accounts because we're moving to a different bank. Can you update it in the system?"
Yeah.
Somebody does it, right? And I mean, tell you, this is one of the reasons why we don't have any of our clients on our website. We just don't do it. We don't. I do not brag or talk publicly about who we work with because of this exact story.
Yeah.
Like this reason it scares me.
Yeah. It's interesting how like you think fairly innocuous information could be used against you. I was
Yeah.
I was interviewing somebody, and I think we weren't talking about social engineering, or whatever the scam was. And in the middle of the conversation, I realized I have the name of my security company, or I did at the time, the name of the security company on a sign in front of my house. It wasn't the world famous ADT.
Right.
And I realized, oh my gosh, well, that sign's good for them because they get advertising. It's not good for me because someone can say,
Right.
hey, I'm calling from da da
Right.
da da. There's a fault with your alarm system.
Right.
We need to come in and service it.
Uh-huh.
I probably I wouldn't necessarily think twice about
You
it. I'm
would
like,
want them to fix it.
oh, definitely come on in and fix it.
Yeah. Now he needs your code so he can disable the system and check. Now you're giving some random stranger your code.
I, and it just like I hadn't thought about, oh
Yeah.
gosh, this is a security platform. I really shouldn't be publicizing the name of the security platform that I'm using.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. I know. Crazy,
yeah,
right?
they people are absolutely not that this didn't happen, but it's absolutely ingenious to think that someone would in the more targeted, the more intentional it's I'm going after Chris versus I'm just going after anybody that they
Which we're
can
seeing more and
be,
more of, by the
yeah,
way. A lot more of.
more targeted.
Yeah, there was actually a report from the FBI that said that what they have found is that over 80% of all the spearfish that are reported to them are using artifacts from the target's social media.
Yeah,
So that means that the people who are attacking them actually went out, went to the social media, looked at the accounts, collected data on you, and then used that data in an attempt to spearfish you. Uh, that's a lot of work if you think about it. But we're seeing it because think about the payout. The payout is so much higher if you get someone emotionally invested.
yeah,
So it works.
yeah. So, what are some of like the red flags that we should be watching out for if someone is using social engineering techniques on us? Like, how do we distinguish that from marketing
Yeah.
or some real situation happening?
Yeah, I love that question. So here's a few tips I give people when they ask me this. First and foremost, if you feel any strong emotion after being asked for a request, that is a great time to pause and think, am I being manipulated? Am I being influenced? Because attackers will always want to use emotion against you. Now, that doesn't mean that every conversation shouldn't have some emotion, but if you think about it, if somebody calls you and they're really pleasant, they ask for your help, they sound really nice on the phone, and they got you laughing, and then some weird request comes in, that's a good time to say, well, that was weird. Like, that's an odd conversation. Or if somebody calls and says they're the IRS and you haven't paid your taxes and you're getting arrested, okay, great. That's a great time to pause it. This is a strong emotion. Okay, which leads me to my second tip, which is critical thought. Think to yourself, in your whole life, has the IRS ever called you for anything? No. And they're not going to ever. If anything, you're going to get a certified letter in the mail that you're going to have to sign for.
Yep.
And that letter will tell you that you are late and you have 30 days or you're going to be fined. Right. The IRS is never going to call you and demand payment with Apple Pay cards or anything like
Yeah.
that. Right. So a little critical thought could help. Now, that doesn't always fix the problem because one of the other big personal scams going on is what they call the grandparent scam, where someone's calling my grandma and saying, hey, this is Chris. Look, I was at a bachelor party. We went over Mexico. I got mugged. I got in a fight. I have no wallet. I'm in prison. Can you give me 5K for bail? I'll promise I'll pay you back as soon as
Yeah.
I get home. Right. So you have to do some critical thought ahead of time. Like what I did with my grandma on that is we set up like a two-party authentication system. So right by her phone, I put a sticky note and I said, Grandma, this is our password, and let's just say it was a unicorn. I go, now no one should ever know this is our password. And you never say it, Grandma,
Yeah.
ever. I'm the one who says it. So if I call you and I say I need money, I'm gonna really big. You say, what's the password, Chris? And if I don't know it, you hang up on me. If I'm too drunk to tell it to you, you hang up on me. And when I sober up, I'll call back. Okay. But
Honey,
whatever it
call me
is,
back when you
right,
sober up.
right. Yeah, that's it. Click. And that's it. And she's like, great, this is awesome. Right. Kept her from getting scammed because that was it. So say, okay, so you have to worry about emotion, critical thought. And then I always tell people if you fall for something, don't let embarrassment make you sweep it under the rug. And that's what a lot of people do. They're like, oh, I'm embarrassed. I fell for it. I hear so many folks, especially older folks, who fall for these romance scams, and I don't want to tell anybody. And there's a two-way street on this. Like as a family member, I think it's important for me to make sure I never tell my family, well, how can you be so dumb?
Yeah.
Right. Because that makes them not want to trust to reach out. But calling your bank, calling your financial institute, calling whatever it is that you lost and reporting it right away can help you at many times get that problem fixed. So I know it's not an exhaustive list, but I tell
Yeah.
people try those three things, and listening to podcasts like this are super important because sometimes we don't even know that these things are happening.
Yeah.
And if you don't know it's happening, then you can't possibly defend against it. So you have to have that knowledge first and foremost, and then following those three tips can really help.
So I often talk about, and I think we've talked about two of these, and I'll ask you about the third because this is, I don't know, my own interpretation of things. we talked about the emotion, we talked about the urgency. Is there any neural mechanism behind an association with authority? I'm the IRS, I'm law enforcement, I'm from your bank, I'm your
Of course.
boss.
Yep.
How much does that play into kind of most of the social engineering scams?
So, and we don't want to change this about society, right? Let's say the majority of us, we know that there are some that aren't, but the majority of we're raised in households where we were taught to respect authority, respect your
Hmm.
teachers, respect your elders, respect the police, respect your boss. So we're ingrained with that process in our mind already that, authority does exist and it should be obeyed, right? Like when you're learning to drive, you teach your kids a stop sign means you actually stop. Why? Not just because you're afraid of getting a ticket, but because not stopping could create death. You can
Yeah,
get hit by someone who doesn't have to stop. So stopping is actually a very important part of the process, right? When a police officer pulls up behind you, it's very important to follow these steps, right? Roll down your windows, keep your hands where they can be seen, be respectful, don't have an attitude. Like these things are important.
yeah.
Um, so authority plays a huge role because now we're in a situation where somebody malicious may be using that very knowledge that we all been taught from childhood against us because they're saying, well, I'm the IRS, and if you don't pay, I'm going to have you arrested. I can't get arrested. I can't go to prison. That'll ruin my whole career, my job, my life. I can't afford that. I need to work, right?
Yeah,
And that fear creates the environment where your brain just starts to think about how do I get out of this? And if they're telling me the only way out of it is to pay, okay, I guess that's what I got to do. And
gotcha.
it shuts down critical thought.
So I wonder, maybe we're getting a little anthropological. In cultures that have less of that have maybe a more inherent distrust in authority, is that something that then, is there, I wonder if there's something else that supplants authority as another mechanism.
Yeah, so there's yes, 100%. So depending on the environment, right? So it may be that authority won't work because, like you said, maybe this group of people don't respect that authority, right? Or they don't have that authority in their country, right? Like I'll give you a great example. We found a vishing network that was coming out of the country of Georgia. Once we exposed them, they were very vocal about, we don't care that you exposed us. Our country will do nothing to us for
Yeah.
this. They don't care about you. You're rich Americans. They don't care. And they were saying all these horrible words to me. There was no fear of authority for them. They knew that the cops weren't going to go kick their door in and throw them in prison for ripping off a bunch of Americans. That wasn't important to them. So authority wouldn't have worked there. So you look at other principles. Robert Cialdini, Dr. Cialdini, he did a great job at defining the principles of influence. So, you have things like social proof. Maybe that can work. And that's like, what does the crowd say? What does the
Hmm.
people say is okay? You have reciprocation, like where it's, I give you something, you give me something back, right? You do have the scarcity principle. That's one that's used in a lot of countries that don't have a lot of authority, where they say, look, we don't have much food. So if you want food, you have to do this or that. You have to buy this stamp. You have to have this political mark. You have to do this, or you don't get the food you need for the day.
Hmm.
All of those types of things are influence principles that could be used in a negative sense and be manipulative too.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's one of the challenges of running a podcast from here in the US is that it's easy to be very US centric in our perception of how
Yeah,
these things are carried out. And I'm sure there are people elsewhere in the world that hear this and go, "Well, I would never fall for that because I don't believe anybody, I
yeah,
don't trust authority, so therefore I
yeah,
can't fall victim to this."
yeah. But there's so many other. See, think about it. All those principles of influence, the goal is the same, and it's to create an emotional environment that stops critical thought.
Yeah.
Right. So let's think about. I'm trying to think what the country was. I think I was doing some work in Brazil, and in Brazil, I was doing some work with the government, and the government was saying that one of the biggest problems they experience down there is men in the Brazilian military cheat on their wives. So honeypots were a huge deal down there.
Hmm.
So they're not using authority. They're not using that. They're using actual lust as a motivator. So they send in very beautiful women to seduce these men and to get them to engage in activities, intimate activities in more risky places where eventually the ask is, I want to be in your office.
Yeah.
And that's when USB keys get planted, or listening devices, or other things that now create a nation state vulnerability. And that's not using any of the principles we just talked about. That's using a whole separate tactic for that. So yeah, malicious social engineers will look at the environment that they want to breach,
Hmm.
and they will find what is the weakness in this environment, and then that weakness is what they exploit.
Gotcha. Are there any kind of new emerging trends in social engineering?
Yeah,
Other than kind of, obviously if you're target specific, your methodology is going to change for that particular individual, but are there any broad trends?
yeah. Vishing. So vishing, which stands for voice phishing, has increased 554% in 1 year.
Wow.
So before, we would see, all of us probably got a few scam calls here or there. Now I don't know about you, but it's daily.
Yeah.
Between text messages and calls, it could be dozens that I'm getting, to the point where I don't even answer my phone if your name does not come up in the caller ID.
Yeah.
If I don't have you in my contact list, you're going to voicemail, and I'll call you back if it's important. And if you don't leave a voice message, I'm never calling you back.
Yeah.
So, and I even tell some of my friends, look, if you call me from a new number, you better leave a message, because there's absolutely no way I'm going to call you back. It says I can't answer all these calls that come in. Now, why? Now, here in this country, T-Mobile and AT&T in the last 12 months were breached, and previous to that, Verizon was breached. So
Yeah.
there's our three major phone networks breached. Millions upon millions of phone numbers are dumped out there with all of our contact data. So now we're in lists being sold to get
Yeah.
called, right? And that's not just this country. Major breaches for telephone networks were in the UK, Ireland, Italy, other parts of Europe have had major phone breaches, to where we're seeing this data just being dumped everywhere.
Interesting. One of the things that I've seen recently, and haven't figured out what the end goal is yet, both my wife and I saw a significant uptick in LinkedIn requests
Mm,
that were, you know, normally it's like either there's no custom message or it's very specific. These ones they were always, if they were sent to me, it was a young the picture was a young
yep.
attractive woman. If it was sent to my wife, it was a young attractive man.
Yep.
And it was, oh, I've seen what you do in your profession. Of course, not naming the profession,
Always,
which was
right?
a good
Yeah.
giveaway. And I'd really like to learn. I really want to grow in
Yes.
my career in this field, and I'd
Yeah.
love it if we could. You seem like an amazing person. I'd love to connect and chat. And the accounts always get killed before I can ever figure out what the end
Yeah.
game is. But have you seen that one as well yet?
Yeah. So actually, let's go back about 4 or 5 years. This is probably when it got popular. There was a major attack on U.S. military that somehow just never made major news, using this very attack. A group in Iran we believe it was Iran, had went out and started LinkedIn accounts for very attractive female reporters here in the country. Then they would contact four-star generals that were out at retiring age,
Hmm.
and want to interview them about their illustrious career in the U.S. military. And during a series of interviews, one group would ask questions down this line, another group would ask questions down this line, and together they can combine those data points and create an environment where they knew so much about operations,
Wow.
operation names. Things got leaked and slipped, and it was a big deal. Now that happened, and all of a sudden we started to see other groups go, "Wow, wait, hang on, never thought about
Hmm.
that one. You mean fake social media accounts?" And it just blew up. And now I'm with you. I get a dozen a day about. And you know what I love is, like, so I the last few years I recently became a professor of social engineering at University of Arizona. So that is what's on top of my LinkedIn.
Yeah.
It's not my job. I do it like, I do 1 semester, 2 semesters a year at that, right? um but now I get these things that are like, Chris, I see what you're doing at University of Arizona, and I would love to be able to connect with you and help you with University of Arizona. And I'm like, dear God, you didn't even check.
Hmm.
Like, just if you read down, it would have been more realistic. Like, I'm an adjunct professor at a university. I don't have any control there. Like, get better. I feel right in the back. Like, please attack me smarter next time. Like.
And then I'll ask one more question before we begin to wrap up here. Do you see like a role of technology I definitely don't believe like technology is ever going to solve social engineering issues. But do you think there are roles in technology that could help maybe give us that pause?
I do. I do, as a matter of fact. I think so. AI scares the daylights out of me. It really does. It scares daylights out of me. And I think even though we'll probably see some good out of it, we're going to see a lot more bad before we do. But I think about like from corporate perspective, there are tools out there now. I know Oracle has one. We're partnering with them on this, so I can mention it. They have a tool that is like a firewall for your phone network.
Hmm.
So a call comes in and it analyzes the call. And let's say the call, of course, of the caller ID, it says it's coming from Texas, but the trunk is coming from Africa somewhere, Chad, right? It's
Yeah.
coming from somewhere else. Well, now a light can be on the person's like desktop that says, hey, the call that's coming in is not originating from where it says. Caution. You can have a
Hmm.
caution light. Or if it's from an area in the world, like let's say Georgia, where we've identified a number of vishing rings, you can have that call black holed.
Yeah.
So it could you could say, I don't even want that call to hit, Chris. So if that call comes in, done, black hold.
Even if it has a US caller ID associated with it, it's coming in
Yep.
on a line that's
Yep.
interesting. Oh,
So
I'd like
there,
that
yeah,
technology.
there are some technologies out there that are and that are successful. They're not available to the consumer.
Hmm.
That's the only problem. So while we're able to look for technological fixes, or let's say not even fixes, technological helpers for corporate America and corporate global, let's just say not
Hmm.
even America, corporate global, we're not yet seeing those same technologies. You can't put it on your cell phone. You can't install it on your home landline if you still have one of those.
Yeah.
So we're still relying on critical thought and and education to be the thing that helps mom, dad, aunt, uncle, grandma, grandpa,
Hmm.
and our kids.
Gotcha. And I know, do you guys provide resources on how to train people in that critical thinking?
So we do. Again, we gear it towards understanding social engineering. So, like, I have a number of training classes that we teach. That we've at my primary class is called Foundational Application of Social Engineering. When I wrote it, its first name was Social Engineering for Pen Testers, and I quickly realized after a year that there is so much more to social engineering that I can't limit it to pen testers. So we
Yeah.
changed the name, and I've had salespeople in that class, psychologists. I got hired to teach that class to MI5 and MI6. I taught that class to SOCOM. I've taught that class all over the globe because it's more about everything we just talked about, like how to use communication tools to understand this human decision making, and then how we can not only make ourselves better, but understand it. So if we are an adversarial simulator, that we can use these skills, better for our customers and clients.
Interesting. And if people, so they can go to, is your class available online through University of Arizona?
No, so the University of Arizona class. Thank you for that. That's an interesting thing. So University of Arizona classes, I am teaching a 7.5 week semester class on social engineering, and it's very unique. If you join that class, it's in a cyber drill curriculum where you learn OSINT and all this. Not from me, from different teachers,
Hmm.
with the goal of getting you into the industry. But my particular class there, we have a deal with a local government agency. They gave me all of their employees as living targets, and my students get to fish and vish and OSINT actual real people for the
Oh, wow.
class. So it's a class like none other. Like, there's no other university doing this. But the foundational class, that's done through my website, social-engineer.com. And then the practical class, which is much more like the one I just described, is also there. Now, the foundational class is always done live in
Hmm.
person, but the practical class is a virtual class. So we do that for anywhere you are.
Gotcha. And if people want to find you and connect with you on social media in a way that is not trying to social engineer you to do something that's not in your interest,
Yes.
how can they find you?
LinkedIn is the best way to do it. LinkedIn is the best. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I feel like I used to say Twitter, but Twitter's kind of turned into a cesspool kind of thing. So I don't really pay much attention to it anymore. But LinkedIn, I still have some really great valuable connections, As long as you don't write me a chain email that's missing information, we'll probably connect, you know?
And any parting words of wisdom before we close up shop here today?
Oh no, man, you asked a lot of great questions. I would just say, one of the things I focus on because I run a nonprofit on the side called Innocent Lives Foundation is understanding these things to keep our kids safe. So social engineering is being used against our kids each and every day. People are trying to groom our children, get them to do things that they definitely should not do. So having these conversations with your children, even when they're very young, could keep them safe from things like that. So I encourage parents to age appropriate conversations, but to include your children in these kinds of discussions so they can be aware of what's happening out in the world.
I see a future book title for you, Social Engineering Prevention for Kids.
Oh, I like it. Not a bad idea, tell you the truth. Not a bad idea at
I,
all.
but like, we do that with money. We teach,
Yeah,
hopefully we do a good job teaching kids financial principles,
yeah, yeah. I
teaching
like it.
kids critical, maybe it's critical thinking for children.
Yeah,
Maybe that's the better
yeah.
title.
I love it. Yeah, it's great. I may
Chris,
steal that.
thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thanks, Chris. It was fun.